The cold hum of the intercom echoed through the sterile, dimly lit corridors of the ISS Orpheus. Farron leaned against the doorframe of the command deck, eyes narrowed as he watched the data stream across the holographic display. The usual buzz of activity filled the air, but today, there was a tension that gripped every crew member's movements. It wasn't the routine of the mission, it wasn't the simple navigation through space. No, something was different. Something was coming. "Captain, we've received an encrypted signal from the edge of the Oort cloud." Remiki's voice broke through the quiet, sharp and precise, as always. The communications officer stood at the far end of the room, her fingers flying over the console with practiced ease. She was the first to notice it, as she always was, but this time, the look on her face was anything but calm. Farron's eyes flicked to the data. The encryption wasn't just complicated, it was alien. It carried a certain coldness to it, like a message sent with intent to disturb. He straightened from the doorframe, crossing the room in quick strides. His boots thudded against the metal floor, a sound that seemed louder than usual in the tense silence. "Play it," Farron ordered, his voice low and commanding. Remiki nodded, the data flashing on the screen as the audio began to filter through. It was a series of distorted static, followed by a single word in an unfamiliar language. A pulse of energy seemed to radiate from the speakers, sending a chill down Farron's spine. "It's the brood," Remiki muttered under her breath, before turning to Farron with a mixture of disbelief and dread. The brood were a mysterious, nearly mythical alien race, beyond their reach, beyond their understanding. Every passing rumor about them felt like a legend, but this signal? This was real. "What are they saying?" Farron's voice was tight. The air between them seemed to thicken, heavy with the weight of an imminent storm. Remiki hesitated, her eyes scanning the data as she searched for a translation, her fingers still moving across the holographic interface. After a long moment, she spoke. "We've breached your wave. Prepare for extinction." The words hung in the air, their cold finality slamming into the crew like a physical blow. Every eye on the command deck turned toward Farron. Silence followed, a silence that stretched on for too long. Farron let out a breath, his jaw clenched. The brood were an enigma, and they had always been more of a shadow than a real threat, until now. "Set course for the Oort cloud," Farron said, his voice firm but his mind racing. He didn't need to explain further. The crew had been through enough engagements to understand the gravity of the situation. Every officer knew what was at stake. "I want all systems at full capacity. Activate the shield protocols and prepare the weapons. We'll be ready for them. We don't even know what they look like," Remiki pointed out, her tone both practical and tinged with concern. "How do we fight something when we don't even know what it is?" Farron met her eyes, his gaze steady and unwavering. "We fight like we always do, on our terms." The crew of the Orpheus had known battles, wars, and betrayals, but nothing had prepared them for this moment. The ship's engines roared to life, and the stars outside became streaks of light as they accelerated into the cold darkness of space. Farron stood at the front of the command deck, staring out into the void as the reality of the situation settled in. They were not just facing an enemy, this was an extinction-level event. It wasn't just about survival, it was about defiance. Humanity's last bastion in the galaxy, a symbol of their determination, was being tested, and Farron was damned if he would let it fall. The ship's internal lights flickered as the tension ratcheted up another notch. Remiki worked tirelessly at her station, her fingers flying over the console as she monitored every signal, every flicker of data that crossed their path. "Captain," Remiki called, her voice tense. "We're entering the outer edge of the Oort cloud. I'm detecting multiple energy spikes, closer than expected." Farron's pulse quickened. The brood didn't waste time. They had breached their defenses faster than anyone thought possible. The weapons of the Orpheus were formidable, but they were designed to combat conventional threats, not something that defied logic and reason. "Deploy long-range sensors," Farron ordered, his eyes narrowing. "We need to know exactly what we're up against." A series of beeps filled the air, followed by the flicker of a new display in front of Farron. The image was blurred, static-filled, but he could make out something unmistakable: vast, hulking silhouettes. There were no details, just the impression of immense, looming figures, their presence as unsettling as it was unnatural. "It's them," Remiki muttered, her voice barely a whisper. Frerin didn't respond immediately. He didn't need to. The brood were here, and now the Orpheus would fight or die in the wake of their invasion. "Activate the defense grid," Frerin ordered coldly. The ship's weapons systems hummed to life, their readiness indicators flashing a sickly green. They weren't going to let the brood get to Earth without a fight. "Get the fleet on standby." The tension was unbearable. Frerin could almost feel the weight of the crew's eyes on his back as he stood in front of the tactical display. His mind was racing, but his demeanor remained calm. The brood were an unknown force, but they were not invincible. Frerin had faced the unimaginable before. He wasn't about to let it consume him now. The ship rocked, a violent tremor shaking the command deck as something massive impacted their shields. "Direct hit!" "Shields holding!" Remiki shouted, her voice filled with both relief and alarm. "Their firing was something we've never encountered before." Frerin's gaze hardened. "Prepare for impact," he barked. "We engage them now." The Orpheus surged forward, breaking free of the gravitational pull of the Oort cloud and charging straight into the darkness. Frerin's pulse quickened as the brood ship's outline became clearer, and their war cries, electronic, chilling, cut through the silence. They were ready. They had to be. "Let's show them what humanity's made of," Frerin muttered, gripping the arm of his chair as the first volley of fire lit up the dark void. The battle for humanity's survival had begun, and there was no turning back. The Orpheus shuddered violently, and the sound of energy weapons crackling through the atmosphere was deafening. Frerin gripped the edge of his console, feeling the sharp tremor of the ship's hull beneath his fingers. The brood's assault was relentless, waves of energy blasting into the ship's shields, each impact pushing them closer to their breaking point. "We've lost the outer shields!" Remiki's voice broke through the chaos, her tone tinged with alarm. "The first line is down, damage report incoming." Frerin's mind raced. His fingers flew over the control panel, activating the internal comms. "All hands brace for impact. Prepare the inner shields. Lock down all escape pods and secondary systems. We're not letting them tear this ship apart." The ship's intercom buzzed with static, followed by the sharp, authoritative voice of his second-in-command, Lieutenant Grissom. "Captain, we've got incoming missiles from the brood ship. It's a direct hit, damage to the starboard engines." A sinking feeling gripped Frerin's chest. If the brood destroyed the engines, the Orpheus would be a sitting target. They'd be stranded in the middle of nowhere with no way to fight back. "Patch me into the engines!" Frerin barked. "Now, Grissom!" Within moments, the engineer's face appeared on the holographic display. His forehead was slick with sweat, his eyes wide with panic. "Captain, I've got systems failing across the board. We've got a hole in the outer hull, at least 4 compartments exposed to the vacuum. We're losing power. I can't promise you we'll stay in the fight much longer." Frerin's teeth clenched. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing in on him. This wasn't just another battle, this was a turning point. If they lost the Orpheus, it would be the beginning of the end for humanity. "Listen to me," Frerin said, his voice calm but firm, the steel of authority cutting through the panic in the engineer's eyes. "You've got one job, and that's to get the engines back online. Do it or we all die here. I'm giving you 30 minutes. Make them count." The engineer nodded quickly, his image vanishing from the display as he scrambled to coordinate repairs. Frerin turned back to the main view. The brood ship loomed in the distance, a monstrous silhouette against the star-speckled black of space. It was unlike anything they'd seen before, massive and dark, its jagged edges gleaming with strange alien energy. A shudder ran through Frerin's bones as he realized what this meant. The brood weren't just here to invade, they were here to end humanity's future. "They're realigning for another strike," Remiki shouted. Her voice trembled despite her best effort to remain composed. "We need to buy some time." Frerin didn't hesitate. Activate the countermeasures. Deploy the EMP bursts. Overload their targeting systems. The crew scrambled into action. The Orpheus fired a series of electromagnetic pulses, a hailstorm of energy designed to disrupt the brood ship's systems. The hull of the Orpheus groaned as the shockwaves from the EMP blasts coursed through its structure. For a moment, it seemed like the brood ship faltered, its energy beams flickering as its targeting systems shorted out. But then, without warning, a much larger weapon discharged from the brood ship, a beam of raw, unrelenting energy that struck the Orpheus' dead center. The entire ship jerked violently, and the command deck was plunged into darkness. Freren's heart hammered in his chest as the lights flickered back to life. The ship's alarm blared, warning of critical damage in multiple sections. The crew scrambled, trying to restore order amidst the chaos. "Report!" Freren's voice was sharp, cutting through the disarray. "Main engines offline," Brimiki reported, her fingers flying over her console. "We've lost propulsion. There's a breach in the primary reactor. We're running on backup power, but it won't hold long." Grissom's voice crackled through the comms again, grim and exhausted. "Captain, we've got multiple fires on Deck 5. The blast tore through our weapons systems. We're not going to be able to retaliate effectively." Freren didn't flinch. Every fiber of his being screamed for action. There was no time to mourn the losses, no time for anything but the fight. Humanity's future rested on their shoulders, and he would not let it slip away. "Activate the emergency weapons protocols. Prepare the backup turrets and target their weak points. Rimiki, prepare all escape pods for launch. Get those civilians off this ship, now!" The crew worked with brutal efficiency, shifting into high gear despite the looming threat. Rimiki's face was set in a mask of determination as she coordinated the escape pod launches. "Pods away, Captain! The civilians are safe." Freren's throat tightened at the thought of what that meant. The civilians, refugees from other colonies, people who had escaped the brood's initial onslaught, were the last survivors of their kind. But they weren't the priority now. He had one mission, and it was one he couldn't afford to fail. He turned back to the view screen. "Open a channel to the brood ship," he ordered, his voice low and steady. "I want to talk to their commander." A long pause. The seconds seemed to stretch like hours. Finally, a cold, metallic voice crackled over the comms. "You're foolish to resist, human. Your species will bow to the brood, or you will be exterminated." Freren's lips curled into a savage grin. "I don't think you understand, Commander. The last thing humanity does is kneel." Before the brood commander could respond, Freren severed the comm link, his mind racing. They had no more time for words, only action. He turned to Grissom. "Prepare the final assault plan. We hit them with everything we've got. All remaining energy reserves are ours to use. Make it count." Grissom nodded, his face taut with the tension of the moment. "Aye, Captain." Freren's eyes locked on the brood ship once more. A strange sense of calm washed over him, even as the Orpheus groaned beneath the strain. The stakes had never been higher. This wasn't just about survival. This was about proving to the galaxy that humanity, no matter how cornered, would always find a way to fight back. With a final look toward his crew, Freren barked his last command. "Let's give them hell." The ship groaned under the assault. The brood's relentless fire had torn through the Orpheus hull like a razor through paper. With every passing second, their grip tightened around humanity's last hope. But Freren's resolve remained unshaken. He could feel the pulse of the ship, its flickering lights, its strained energy. But underneath it all, there was one undeniable truth: the Orpheus still fought. And as long as it did, so would he. "Grissom," Freren said, his voice cold and commanding. "Status on the final assault." Grissom's face, grim and battered from the chaos, flickered onto the screen. His shirt was torn, his face streaked with sweat and blood, but his eyes remained focused. "We've rerouted all remaining power to the auxiliary turrets. The targeting systems are unstable, but we've got a clear shot at their engine core." Freren nodded, the weight of the situation hanging heavy on him. He could feel it in his gut. This was their last chance. One shot. One shot to cripple the brood ship and give humanity a fighting chance. Launch all remaining ordnance, now, Frerin ordered. I want every weapon at our disposal targeting their engine core. No holding back. A series of rapid beeps and mechanical hums filled the air as the Orpheus backup turrets activated, their weapons locked onto the brood ship. The Orpheus' remaining energy surged, and for a brief moment, Frerin thought he could hear the hum of defiance within the very bones of the ship. The first volley of weapons fired in unison, a barrage of energy blasts that lit up the dark expanse of space. The brood ship flinched under the weight of the attack, its shields flickering, but it didn't fall. Not yet. Remiki's voice crackled over the comms. Captain, their shields are holding, but we've made a breach on the outer layer. The engine core is exposed, one more hit, and we can breach it. Frerin's pulse quickened. He could feel the tension in his body, his heart pounding in his chest. One more shot, he muttered to himself, but his voice didn't waver. He didn't have the luxury of doubt. Not now. The Orpheus groaned again, as if it were on the brink of collapse. They were pushing it to the edge, every system straining under the pressure. But Frerin wouldn't let the ship die without a fight. He wouldn't let humanity die without a fight. Prepare the final shot, Frerin commanded. Target their core, everything we've got. This ends now. The crew moved with methodical efficiency, their movements swift and precise despite the chaos that surrounded them. The ship shuddered as the final energy reserves were poured into the main cannon. The command deck was silent, save for the crackle of the comms and the pounding of Frerin's heart. The entire crew, every officer, every soldier, knew what was at stake. Frerin turned toward Remiki, his gaze steady. You ready? She didn't hesitate. Aye, Captain. We're all in this together. A heavy silence followed. Then, the Orpheus fired. The energy blast surged from the ship like a storm unleashed, a brilliant beam of raw, focused power. Frerin's eyes tracked the shot as it tore through space, a streak of light in the dark void. Time seemed to slow as it neared the brood's ship. Frerin held his breath. The impact was deafening. The brood ship shuddered violently, its once pristine shields rupturing like glass. The core, exposed by the earlier hits, began to glow, a bright, sickly green, as the energy from the Orpheus blast tore through it. There was a blinding flash, and then, in the blink of an eye, the brood ship disintegrated. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, the shockwave hit. The Orpheus was thrown off course, its hull creaking under the pressure as the energy from the explosion radiated outward. Frerin was thrown to the ground, his body slamming against the cold metal floor. His vision blurred as the ship groaned under the shockwave, but he fought to maintain control, scrambling to his feet. Report! Frerin barked, gripping the edge of his console as he tried to steady himself. Remiki's voice came through, her tone strained but filled with relief. Captain, the brood ship, it's gone. The core's been destroyed. We did it. Frerin exhaled sharply, his body sagging with the weight of the moment. They had won. The brood were no longer a threat, their ship reduced to debris scattered across the void. Humanity had lived to fight another day. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Grissom's voice came through the comms, his voice tense. Captain, we've got more incoming. Multiple brood ships on the edge of the system, reinforcements. We're not out of the woods yet. Frerin's eyes darkened, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself to breathe. Prepare the fleet, he said, his voice hard. We're not done yet. They had won this battle. But this war was far from over. The brood had shown them their teeth, but humanity wasn't about to roll over. Not now. Not ever. Grissom, Frerin continued, standing tall once more. Prepare the Orpheus for the next fight. This is just the beginning. And with that, the Orpheus turned, its engines firing to life once more, as it steeled itself for the battles yet to come. The fight for humanity's survival wasn't over. It had only just begun.